even before I became an adoptive mom, when I was just thinking about this process, I knew that I wanted to be a parent and I knew that I wanted to give everything to my child and to my family. And so my job is still important to me. My career, my identity as a researcher is important to me, but I want to be able to take time away and fully feel disconnected and not have that hanging over my head when I'm spending time with my family. Maybe that means I'm not going to be putting myself up for that promotion or pushing myself so hard to climb that corporate ladder right now. For now, I'm looking to have more balance in my life.
Welcome to In Her Words. This podcast is for women navigating through change, career, identity, motherhood, and just figuring out what's next. I'm Roberta Dombrowski, host of In Her Words and founder of Learn Mindfully. Each episode, I sit down with women who are asking big questions, navigating transitions, and trying to make sense of life as it shifts. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need space to be real. Let's get into it. Today I'm talking to Madeline Smith, a UX researcher, creative mind, and new parent by adoption, about the inner landscapes of the waiting game, building a family intentionally, and what it means to lean into both career and caregiving. Welcome, Madeline, to In Her Words.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited to dive into this topic today with you. We'll chat a little bit about adoption and both of our perspectives on it. Yeah, I'm curious what first brought you to choosing adoption or opening your heart for adoption?
Yeah, I actually can't remember the specific moment that I thought about adoption because it's always been part of my plans as long as I can remember. I think when I was a little kid, I remember looking at parents around me and knowing that I wanted to be a parent, but also knowing that I didn't want to be pregnant. And the idea of, being pregnant, giving birth was just never appealing to me, but being a parent was. And I think I saw so many depictions of adoption in movies that made it seem like such a simple, wonderful, easy thing that it just in my head that was the version of what it would be like. So it was always something that I was thinking about. And my now husband and I met in high school. We've been high school sweethearts. And back when we were teenagers, I had first told him that I wanted to have children by adoption. And so he had many years to kind of wrap his head around the idea before we
Yeah.
actually started the process. But once I started doing the research, I realized there was so much more to adoption than I had ever considered, and that a lot of, my original ideas about it were completely inaccurate.
Yeah, yeah. I love that journey that you're talking about, and I do not blame you about the not wanting to be pregnant because it is not fun. I had a really tough time personally with it. But yeah, I one of the reasons why I thought today's conversation would be so interesting is because you've built your family through adoption, and I'm a transracial adoptee. So I was born in Colombia, moved over to the States when I was just a little wee baby, and grew up in a family that didn't look like me on the outside. And so I love the that you're talking about what you thought about adoption, and all those years too ended up being very different. There was a lot more involved. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started my adoption journey as an adult, once I was finally ready to start this, I started talking to different adoption agencies and learning more about the process. And really, one of the things that stuck out with me is just how how problematic adoption can be in certain situations and in the history of our country. And I think that it was really important to me personally and to my husband to only go through with adoption if we felt like we were doing it in an ethical way. And so we did learn a lot about transracial adoption, and we were lucky to find an adoption agency that really, really values the needs of the child first and foremost, and while respecting the needs of the birth family and the adoptive family, but really centering the family, the child, and as part of that triad. And that was just really important to us. And I'll share my husband and I are an interracial couple. So our family was, no matter how we we formed our
Yeah,
family, we were
yeah.
going to have members who looked different from each other. And we joke that we kind of expected the child that we adopted might look like more like one or the other of us, but in reality, he looks nothing like either of us. So how it all comes together. And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, you talked about the, like, time-intensive searching for agencies. How did you find an agency that was ethically like, driven by ethics? Do you feel like it was transparent upfront about kind of how each agency operated, or was it kind of like a web once you got into it?
yeah, I mentioned that when I first started this process, that wasn't even something I was thinking about until I started digging into it more. And so I started by just researching what are the different paths to adoption. There's international adoption, domestic adoption, private adoption, foster adoption, and trying to narrow in which path might make sense to us. And we chose a domestic adoption agency that places infants. And once we kind of narrowed in on that approach, I started doing the research of what agencies were licensed in my state that we could even work with, and then contacting them to figure out, are they accepting new families right now? What does their process look like? And a lot of agencies had kind of an info session that you would attend to learn more about their process and what it's like to work with them. And I sat through several of those that just felt like sales pitches, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. They were talking about, there was money to talked about like their money back guarantee, and I could
It's a
not.
child, yeah.
Yeah. We're talking about human beings here, not a car. And I kind of reached a point where I was thinking maybe this wasn't something I wanted to pursue because I just kept getting this icky vibe from different agencies. And when I did a first intro call with the agency we ended up working with, it just felt totally different. I felt comfortable. I felt like these are people who respect my values and care about the same underlying things that I do. And I trusted them to go on this journey together.
Yeah, I love that, and it sounds like you trusted your intuition because I've read, quite some books as I go through my own journey and healing around adoption, and there's a lot of complexes. There's people out there who adopt for the wrong reason, and they want that money back guarantee, so to speak, but it is a child.
Yeah, and it was really important to me that any child I brought into my family would be loved and would be supported in our community. And one of the things about adoption is it's a long process from when you first kind of start researching until you eventually are matched with a child and bring them home. And fortunately, that gave us a lot of time to have difficult conversations with some of our friends and family members and really kind of set those expectations of why we were doing this and why we were approaching it the way we were, and try to maybe stave off some of those tricky things that could come up later that could hurt our child as they grew up if they were hearing the wrong things.
Yeah, it really sounds like boundaries conversations ahead of time.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Of course, with anything, there's mistakes we made along the way and lessons learned,
Of
things we would do
course.
differently, but growing and evolving together.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that the process in general took a long time. Are we talking like months, years?
Years, yeah. So from the first time I started seriously contacting different adoption agencies until we actually met our son was about 3 years. And so it took us maybe 4 months to kind of choose which agency we wanted to work with. Once we started working with them, it took us about 10 months to go through the process to be approved. There were a lot of courses that we took through them to learn about the different aspects of adoption, transracial adoption, waiting, having a child to take care of, all of these things. And then once we were approved, it's just kind of a waiting game until you are matched with the child that is right for your family.
Yeah. What you're saying about the classes is taking me back to pregnancy as well, because they have all the parent classes at the hospital and the videos great for like conceptual understanding, but it's
Mhm.
completely different once you get into it with your family and with the child at home.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And we were going through this process during when COVID was still a really large part of our lives. And so all of our courses and things were happening on Zoom, which was super convenient for the not having to leave my house and drive an hour and a half to the adoption agency's headquarters. But it also meant we didn't have as much connection with the other families that were going through it. And we didn't have a chance to kind of talk in person with one of the seminars that the agency puts on, they bring in some adult adoptees and some birth parents that you can get meet and ask questions. And doing that on Zoom is, I think, a totally different experience than if you're in the same room and can kind of have a side conversation over lunch.
Yeah, yeah, and dig into the nuance a little bit more because on Zoom, it's so structured, you don't get, like, the side, and you can talk offline and stuff like that, so, yeah, yeah. I'm curious because 'cause you're talking a little bit about your support system. Do you feel like you have a good support system through this major change that you've went through?
Absolutely, and I feel so, so lucky to have that in my life. I In the course of my adult life, I left my hometown for about 14 years. I moved around to different parts of the country for college and grad school and my academic career. And then in 2020, we moved back to our hometown to be closer to our families. And I sometimes have these thoughts of like, why do I live in a small suburb in Pennsylvania? Is this really where I thought my life would
Yeah,
be?
yeah.
But really, it's that support network and having my mom, my sister-in-law, my just a number of family members nearby who are able to step in and help when we need them has been incredibly helpful. Um,
Crucial. Yeah, they can come in, like, babysit, emergency, like,
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure where you're at personally with this experience yet, but my son is in daycare, and since he started daycare, he has been sick so, so often. And every time that he can't go to daycare because he needs to stay home sick, trying to balance doing a job and, working remotely means I have some flexibility, but I can't spend my entire day taking care of my sick child and still get my job done at the same time.
Yes,
So
yes.
having this village, this support network of family members that we can call in to come over and help has been so amazingly helpful.
That sounds amazing. I'm actually coming from the complete opposite. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York. My family's there. My husband actually grew up in Central Pennsylvania, and so his family is still there. We have had our son home for the last 7 months, and it's been, like, splitting between me and him, and then my son starts daycare on Monday or on Tuesday, so it's gonna be I'm thinking ahead to what you're saying because I know the sickness is gonna come, and I'm like, "We're his emergency contacts." Like, which is great for me because I have, like, the flexible schedule, but if I do go back to full-time at some point, it's gonna be like, so who can pick 'em up? Like, we gotta share it. It's gonna be interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've had to have some really difficult conversations in our house to figure out how to split that load. And, I have an amazing partner who is an equal co-parent in so many ways, but his job is less flexible than mine. He can't answer the phone call from daycare and go pick up her son when he's sick. And so that means that more of that burden falls on me. And so trying to just kind of figure out an approach that works for both of us where we're getting to enjoy both the like happy times with our son that bring us so much joy and also sharing the burden of the times that are harder.
Yeah, 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 because being a parent is multifaceted. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
I'm curious because your career we haven't talked much about it, but you're a user researcher. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what has that journey been like as a researcher and then now being a parent too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my background as a researcher totally informs the way I approach parenting. I'm coming from especially the academic background where we did, in-depth literature reviews. I was going out and reading scientific articles and trying to gather as much data as I can to kind of inform all of the decisions I'm making about parenting. And I think that I've had to, in some ways, let some of that go and recognize and accept that there's not always one right answer to
Yes.
all of the all of these decisions. There's a lot of, non-optimal choices, and it's having to pick and choose what makes sense for you. And I think I probably do a lot of really informal user research in my life as a parent where I'm talking to my friends who are they're the users in this situation, right? They're
Yeah, yeah.
other moms, other dads, what their experiences have been like. And I find myself kind of trying to make decisions based on both actual scientific data in some situations, but also just the anecdotes and stories from the people I love and trust. And
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, yeah. And intuition too, I feel like. Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because I feel like the transition into being a parent, similar, like, I feel like before I read up all these books and I was like, "I had my plan in place," and then now, like, my son is 7 months now, like, starting solids, and I'm like, how much my it has shifted, like, when we started solids, I'm like, "I don't know, like, what do we do?" And then, like,
yeah,
frantically Googling because it's hard to be prepared for every single scenario that comes up.
absolutely. And I think having access to the internet as a
Yeah.
parent is
Okay.
like a blessing and a curse, right? We,
Yes.
if we think back to, our parents and generations before us, they couldn't just Google something in the middle of the night and get an answer. So in some ways, it's amazing to have this resource. And in other ways, you're just bombarded by conflicting information at all times.
And ads for everything.
Yes. Yeah. And and advice that you may or may not, match with your family's perspective and goals. What's worked best for me is finding a few kind of experts or resources or sources that I've decided I trust. And so instead of going out and just Googling, what is this rash? What is this fever? Whatever. I can go specifically to that website that I have already decided I trust and search there. And I think that has helped me to,
Block out the noise.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, avoiding some of that panic, blocking out the noise.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. If you don't mind sharing, what are some of your, like, your favorite sources?
Yeah. So the parent data website from Emily Oster is one of my favorites. I think that she has just, I really value her perspective as someone who is coming from the scientific data, but also it really feels like it's a non-judgmental way of approaching the data. My pediatrician's office has their own app
Oh,
that you
wow.
can kind of search for symptoms and put in there, and it kinda has these warnings of, like, "Here is a sign that you should call us and come in," versus, "Here's something you can wait and see." And so that tends to be my first check for any sort of illness that I'm experiencing.
I love that. I wish that see, that's where, like, technology and, like, family care and all of that intersects. It's like, I wish that so many places had apps like that because it's just the health system is so dysfunctional. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so, I mean, healthcare in this country, there have been so many choices that
Yeah.
we have to make along the way of, is
Yes.
this something that we should take to the doctor? Is this something where
Yes.
I should, is this something I could do a virtual visit for? Or do I need to drive half an hour to the children's express care to
Yeah.
get that specialty care? And it's hard.
It really is, it really is. I'm curious with your adoption journey, what did preparing for, like, maternity leave look like for you and even, like, your transition back postpartum with everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know a whole lot about how parental leave in the United States works until I really started getting into this process. And what I learned is that most companies have kind of separate maternity and paternity leave policies. A lot of times it's been rebranded as parental leave and trying to be more gender inclusive. But there tend to be different policies for people who give birth and parents who do not give birth. I think a lot of these policies are written with the assumption that one parent gives birth or the other one does not. And whether that's fair or not is a whole whole
Yep.
separate conversation. But
Yeah.
because no one in my family gave birth, both parents were essentially given paternity leave. And so when we started this process, I was working for a company where I would have been able to take 6 weeks of paid leave. And with FMLA, I would have been able to take 12, but it would have been unpaid. And at that same company, people who give birth were able to take that entire time paid. So I think
Wild.
I was just looking at that and feeling like this is really not what I need for my family. And so I did actually job search, and one of the things I was looking for is what kind of parental leaves do different companies have. And that was really tricky to navigate because you don't want to like ask a recruiter like, "Hey, by the way, if I go
What's
on
your leave
leave,
policy?
yeah, how much time are you going to pay me for?"
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
But it was tricky to navigate, and I did, once I found my role at my current company, I was comfortable with their policy, and I really spent a lot of my time where I was on that waiting list, kind of understanding the policies and making sure I was prepared so that whenever I did get the call, I would know what to do and not have to kind of find it out at that moment.
Yeah. Do you have, like this is a leading question, that's where we started, but did you have a seamless transition back after the leave?
Yeah, absolutely not. While I was on leave, and just in that time learning to be a parent, going through all of those those changes that you've experienced too. We're in a time where tech companies are going through a lot of changes, and there was unfortunately a large layoff at the company I was working for, and the team that I was working on was significantly impacted. So that team was essentially disbanded. My manager, manager's manager, manager's manager's manager were all unfortunately laid off. And so that actually, those notifications went out on the day that my son first started daycare, which was
Gosh.
just a really hard emotional day. And then I came back to work a few weeks later. And so I felt all of these mixed emotions of being grateful that I had a job to return to, nervous about being a working parent and balancing it, and at the same time having to navigate essentially starting a new job. I was on a new team with a new management team and new expectations and having to kind of prove myself all over again and doing that at a time where there was so much going on outside of work made it really challenging for me.
Yeah, there's so much, I would say, like, cognitive load with being a new mom of just, like, information overload. There's stimulus, you're not getting sleep, there's so much change. It's one of those, like, I think if you look at a list of, like, what are the biggest changes in life, it's like losing a job or job transition plus parent. So it's like you had 2 of those at the same time. So tough.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces that was really hard for me with that was on my previous team. These were people I'd been working with for a couple of years. We knew each other really well. I knew what they thought about working parents. I knew that my manager and my manager's manager and my manager's manager were all moms. I saw how they navigated things like snow days and sick days and how
Mhm.
what the norms were with communicating with your teammates and being flexible in that regard. And when
Yeah.
I went back to work on this new team, I was starting from 0. So I didn't know what the norms were on this team, and I didn't know how to ask and say, "Hey, what do I do if my kid is sick?" And I think especially with that recent layoff hanging over my head, I was worried about my job security and, just started paying that daycare bill. So trying to kind of balance proving myself, not asking for too much help, not looking like someone who's flaky and constantly having to
Yeah.
call out sick.
It sounds like a lot of pressure with the transition back, juggling all those things. Do you feel like you overwork or anything like that to try and, like, prove the value to the team?
Absolutely. And I don't think I realized the extent I was doing that until recently when the burnout started to set in. And I think I I was aware that I was doing it somewhat at the time, but I also just felt so much pressure that I was putting on myself really. My managers weren't putting this pressure on me. It was it was self-imposed that I felt like I needed to show them that I could be good, and I think I also felt like I needed to prove it to myself that I could still deliver quality work the way that I had beforehand. And yeah, that's meant things like this week, for example, my son was homesick 2 days. And while my mom was able to come over and help watch him, which is amazing, I still missed out on some hours of my workday. And so I'm playing catch up and I was working until midnight last night, which is not something I ever want to do and something that I had really good boundaries about before becoming a parent.
Yes.
And I've kind of had to, kind of bend things a little. Now I do more
Yeah.
of, if there's a break in my day where I don't have any meetings, I might run some errands then and after bedtime come back to work and make up for that lost time.
Yeah, yeah. What you said about before the boundaries were there and then now post, it's like it's different. I can relate to that, and I hear that a lot from working parents as well. It's like it's an identity shift that you're going through, like, before baby, post baby, and, like, even myself, I feel like I had these rituals, routine in place, and then now it's like there's this Wild West period right after, and you're like, you're getting your sea legs with baby and figuring out, like, what does it look like now? What's the reality? Because we do have to pay the bills and get the benefits and daycare and all that, but you still need to fill up your cup, and honor your energy and capacity and everything.
Yeah, and it's hard to balance and, what it's a moving target of what
Yeah.
makes sense and what fills my cup this week might not be the same that it
Yeah.
did last week, and
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like you have, like, outlets for yourself, like hobbies or self-care time as a mom?
yeah, it's harder to find that than it used to be, but I do. Right now, I'm a big reader, so I kind of escape into books and these happy little worlds where everything goes perfectly and happy ever afters. That's my way of kind of turning off my brain and relaxing, taking some time away. One thing I have yet to figure out is this challenge of being because I work fully remote from my house when my son is home because he's sick or it's evening or whatever it is, I think even when my partner is caring for him and, I know that I trust him, he's taking great care of our son, I don't need to worry about him, but still I can hear from the next
Oh,
room.
yeah, yep.
You hear the baby crying. It's
Yep.
it's hard to relax.
Oh, it's so hard, it's so hard. I end up, like, pressing the speaker a little bit higher, and I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
focus on the call." Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We just started talking to contractors to renovate our house specifically
Yeah.
so we can move my office into the basement and farther
Oh.
away from whatever else is going on just
Nice.
because it's so nice that my son loves me. He's at a stage right now where
Yeah, yeah.
he's in a big mama phase. Every time he sees me, he's putting his arms out and
Aw.
and wants me to pick him up, and that fills my cup. I love it so much, and at the
Yep.
same time, every time I can't pick him up because I need to go back to work, I need to do whatever it is I need to do, not just work, but make dinner, clean the house, whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel that guilt. But
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I find that's often, like, children are very resilient, but it's the parent, it's like the second you walk away, you hear it or you're thinking about it, it's there, yeah. How did things if you don't mind me, like, sharing, I'm curious because you mentioned about having to restart the dynamic with, like, your new team and stuff like that. Did you end up learning that some of your team are parents themselves, and so it took away, like, some of the guilt or
yeah, definitely. That really helped. So, when I came back and started talking to my new colleagues, we were able to share more about ourselves personally, but it takes a little while until you kind of get in that space of feeling comfortable with how much you're sharing with essentially near strangers. One thing that was super helpful is one of my former teammates who was also moved to the same team with me. Her son was born 4 weeks before mine joined our
Oh,
family.
nice. Yeah.
So we were kind of on leave together and navigating this whole thing together and just having, that work bestie that you could call and talk to about all these things and talk each other down from the ledge was really helpful. And yeah, over time I've learned more about my managers and their experience as parents and it won't surprise anyone that they're caring, understanding humans who are
Yeah,
are here
yeah.
to support me, but I just
Nice.
didn't know that initially.
Yeah, it can be really hard. I actually got laid off while I was 10 weeks pregnant, and one of the reasons I think it kinda happened is I was being asked to do, like, night calls and stuff like that, and I think that, like, one of the things that no matter what company I end up in next, it's really important to know whether the leader has experience with a family or not. Because I just think the empathy, you understand as a parent what it means to wake up in the middle of the night and have to be there because 'cause they're teething or whatever it might be, versus someone who may not have that experience at all. They don't understand.
I would take it even one step further than that and try and figure out if these are leaders who have experience being involved parents. There are
There you
people
go.
out there who
Yeah. Yeah.
rely on their spouse to do every aspect of that,
Yeah.
people who never woke up and changed the diaper.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
just because they're a parent, they might not have that empathy
True.
that you're
Very
looking
true.
for.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious now that you are in the thick of motherhood, as I call it, has anything surprised you? Like, what's been the most surprising thing since becoming a mom?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, there's been a lot of surprising moments along the way, but maybe just how much joy my son brings me. I think in the beginning it was easy for me to focus on the stress of it and the worries and the concerns, the anxieties of is he getting enough sleep? Is he getting enough bottles? How am I going to cope with going back to work? And just really finding the joy in the moments where he snuggled up with me when he was a newborn and I was on leave. I spent so much time wearing him in a wrap and pacing circles around my house with him sleeping on me, and that just, like, it made me so happy, and same thing now, even when he is sick and awake in the middle of the night and I'm just really wishing he was going back to sleep, at the same time, I can enjoy that he's snuggling up on me and he needs his mama, and I'm happy to be that mom.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, yeah, I always say, like, even in the finicky days, they're crying, they're teething, when they're laying on you, like, or you're feeding them a bottle and they look up at you, it's like, "I can't be mad at you." Like,
Yeah.
"You don't want to, I love you." Yeah.
The first time that he was able to walk across the room and walk up to me and put his arms out and hug me was just
My god.
heartbreaking. You got that to look forward to.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm curious if there's any assumptions or kind of preconceived notions that you had about adoption that has been shattered for you looking back now.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned that my initial perceptions of adoption all came from popular media, and
Yep,
so, you see movies like Juno where there's
yep.
a pregnant teenager who's making this choice to make an
Mhm.
adoption plan, and so I think a lot of us have that idea in our heads, people who aren't familiar with adoption, that that's how it works, and once I started doing the research and talking to my adoption agency, I learned that a lot of birth parents are actually older and already have children and are making these choices for completely different reasons than what we might be familiar with. And so I think that was one day one, just breaking that expectation in my mind.
Yeah, it looks so different, and I feel like it's like the popular things are like, you see them in glimpses in the media and stuff like that, but there's so much unrepresented of what adoption actually looks like unless you're in it. Then you're in it, you potentially meet other people, you're able to talk about it, but I think for a lot of people, there are so many unknowns. It's kind of this black box almost that if you're not accustomed to it, you don't really get exposure to it much.
Yeah, I'd say another piece that really kind of surprised me as I got more into it was the grief that goes along with adoption. So I think in that popular media, you tend to see this joyful side of the adopted family who's so happy to welcome this baby into their lives, and the adoptees who are so happy to have this new loving
Yep.
family. And the reality is it's not always that way. No matter how wonderful and loving this adoptive family as a unit might be, there's still always going to be a level of grief there that this adoptee is experiencing with
Yeah.
the loss of connection to their birth family. And I think that's not something that is commonly acknowledged outside of the adoption community.
No, not at all. Really appreciate you saying that too. I think where we are today with adoption is very different than when I was adopted, which was like early 90s. Not spoken about as much. There was a lot more of like the stories that you would see. It's transracial adoption. There was not as much support as well for adoptees. I was personally really benefited from in Boston, there's a group called, Boston Post-Adoption Resources that have, like, groups and communities and stuff like that, and so it's been cool to see over the years, the support has changed.
Yeah, and it's interesting, even going back further in the history of adoption, when the norm and the expectation was to keep it a secret and hide it from
Mhm.
the adoptees and to
Yep.
never tell them the truth of their history,
Yeah.
and that's just completely thinking has changed on that, and
Yeah.
we believe in openness about this. It's something that we, from day one, have talked to our son about. Does he necessarily understand the concept at 15 months old? No, but
It's
but
there
but
for when he is. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
never going to be this big shameful secret. It's something that we
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about openly.
I love that because I think really at the heart of what you're talking about, and I feel like this might be influenced by your background in user research, is the child first approach to the adoption, which is like we always talk about human centered and all that stuff, but it really does sound like that is the approach that you've taken throughout this process with the family. So
Absolutely. As as a human-centered, design practitioner, I've spent so much time thinking about putting the users first and being the advocate for the user. And now my role as an adoptive mom is to put my child's needs first, and he is the person I'm going to advocate for.
Yeah,
I love
I
that.
love that. I'm curious now that you have shifted back to work, to motherhood, this new role that you're in. How has, like, work, ambition, success, has any of that shifted for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in my past life as an academic, there was so much pressure to explicitly compare people to one another, like the entire publisher perish mindset that you need to go through to get tenure. The process of getting tenure involves having letters written up comparing you explicitly to all the other researchers and professors in your field. And it's just this really competitive mindset, and so it took me a while to kind of break that from my career ambitions. And that's something I started working on that before becoming a mom and really trying to break myself of the habit of, I used to, as a grad student, go on Google Scholar and compare what's my H index
Oh my
compared to my
gosh.
my colleagues. And I think it's after transitioning to corporate world, I would sometimes look at my peers and say, "Oh, this is someone I was in school with, and now they're so many levels higher than me at their company. I should be competing. I should be keeping up." And I think I've had to really consciously remind myself that that's not the choice that I'm making and what I'm prioritizing right now. So even before I became an adoptive mom, when I was just thinking about this process, I knew that I wanted to be a parent, and I knew that I wanted to give everything to my child and to my family. And so my job is still important to me. My career, my identity as a researcher is important to me. It's important to me to do good quality work that I'm proud of. But I want to be able to take time away and fully feel disconnected and not have that hanging over my head when I'm spending time with my family. And so, yeah, maybe that means I'm not going to be putting myself up for that promotion or pushing myself so hard to climb that corporate ladder right now. And maybe that's something I'll revisit in the future, but for now, I'm looking to have more balance in my life.
Yeah, what you're talking about is a value shift, like what was important, the searching for the articles, the comparing, all
Yeah.
of that. Nope. Family, child first, baby first. And yes, work still matters, but it's like lower down on the values than what is right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and that value shift, like I said, it wasn't an overnight thing that automatically happened for me. It was something I really had to consciously think through, and it was something I started thinking about when I went through my career change from the academic world to the corporate world years ago. But it's still hard to sometimes break that habit of I find myself looking at a career ladder, or looking at an announcement on LinkedIn and still wanting to compare myself to others. But now there's a whole other level of that too, where I look
With
at
parenting. Yeah.
parenting, right? You compare yourself to that other parent who threw the most wonderful birthday party, or that parent who is able to spend all of this time doing arts and crafts with their child, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I think I think that comparison is really hard to step
Yeah.
away from.
Yeah. They always say, like, comparison is the thief of joy, and I have that as well. I believe that, like, as humans, we all do, and when I notice it, I try to just check in with myself of just, like, I'm on a different lane, I'm on a different, like, path than other people, and we're all going through different things. Like, it's really easy to jump into the comparison, but that person may be getting the promotion at work and they're burning out and they're hating it because they just wanna be home with their family, and yeah, it's just trying to always remember that there's a side to every story and
Yeah.
experience.
I do think that being a parent has made me more empathetic to what other folks are going through at work. I think when I was younger, I might not have been thinking about what someone else is doing. And I caught myself at times being upset about, oh, why didn't this person respond to my email right away? Or why haven't they done this thing that we talked about? And I think now I am just much more understanding of the things outside of work. For me right now, they're parenting, but there's all sorts of things that people go through, health, family, whatever it is that can take you away in the moment. And another thing I try really hard to be intentional about is assuming best intentions. And if someone snaps at me in a meeting, maybe they were up all night with their crying infant and they're
Yep.
just sleep deprived.
Yep.
And
Yep.
trying to put on that hat and be more empathetic.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Transitioning and shifting a little bit, I'm curious for listeners if somebody is considering adoption or curious about it, do you have any recommendations for them of how they can learn more or yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think just being open to hearing the stories from people who've lived experiences. So, talking to adult adoptees, reading the books written by adult adoptees, joining the Facebook groups or the Reddit threads or wherever it is that you can hear those authentic voices and listen to their perspectives, I think will really help someone go into the journey eyes wide open and aware of the realities that adoption can bring.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. How can folks connect with you if they want to learn more, yeah, about you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. Use Madeline E. Smith. There are a lot of Madelines out there, so that middle initial helps. And feel free to send me a message. I'm always happy to talk with people about career stuff, but also just journey as an adoptive parent, and particularly people who are interested in pursuing that. I'd love to chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Thanks for being here. If something in this episode landed with you, feel free to pass it along to someone who might need it too. You can leave a review, subscribe, or just keep tuning in. We're figuring it out together. And remember, your story, your voice, your becoming, it all matters.